learn from. We had a very experienced peer review team. Georgia Gould is the chair of London Councils, as well as being the leader of Camden, and Pat Ritchie is one of the most respected former chief execs, but only recently former chief execs of the core cities in particular. There's lots to be really proud of here, and I think, you know, at the end of a hard year, particularly for the frontline staff, and I include all our staff in that. I know sometimes the central services aren't always thought of in the same way, but given the challenges we've had with having to operate really with fewer members of staff than we had budgeted for through the period because of the pressures that we've had and the recruitment challenges more generally in the economy, I think it's great testament, particularly I think to the culture of the organisation that's flagged around the collaborative sort of team leads mentality that we've worked really, really hard on over a number of years. And also that can-do style. I know that at times I'll come across members and members of the public who don't feel that the council always has that, but I think the vast majority of action that's taken is in really good faith with great intent and great enthusiasm, and the people of this council who work for it. The report refers to a love for the city, and I think that is true. You know, people really buy in, that people stay at Leeds Council and they work for them because they're sort of part of something bigger a lot of the time, I would say. And I think particularly those the flagging of the excellence around the low carbon agenda and the people-based services, the outstanding people-based services, is something, you know, I'm really proud of at this time in particular. There are lots for us to learn as well, as always, which is what the peer review is all about, really. We're very conscious of the risk of staff burnout, and something that we've just had a major meeting about that this morning with the managers of the organisation to think about how we deal with that next year, because I don't think the challenges of workforce are going to disappear early. I think that's set in for the next year or two, I would have thought. So having to operate differently, transform the way we work in some areas, make better use of technology, think about how we're serving the public in a way that can suit them rather than maybe sometimes suit the organisation itself are all things that we need to do. We've done major things to reduce our office estate, which has made a real difference to carbon and to running costs. We need to do the same again on our buildings more generally, but it would be remiss of us not to do that with NHS partners, with, you know, other local partners in the community. So I think a major piece of work around that is going to come through over the next year to 18 months. The financial, we're going to talk about the finances later, so I won't talk about that in any detail, but just to say that that is significant, and the more that we can make that based on evidence and outcomes and deliver on it, the better. The final thing I would just say is that we are increasingly needing to work with regional organisations on the health and social care side and on the economic and transport side, and that's where I think this review sends some good messages about how we make the most of those relationships and play our part in making sure that those organisations are fit for purpose and are doing the job that we need for the city and the region. But it's great, you know, the line about being a beacon of best practice across the country isn't one that I would normally shout about, because we're very humble in Leeds, but I think it is one on behalf of all the staff that we should celebrate today. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Are there any questions or comments, please? Councillor Carter, please.
Only one. I think the report is very balanced. I think it points out where the city does things well, where the staff do things well. Actually, I was quite surprised how robust it was on some of the other issues where it's, shall we say, LGA speak. But I was pleased to hear the chief executive recognise those little red flags which just pop up in a few places. So yes, and you're right, where it's good, it should be celebrated. Where it warns us about the future, and I would suggest it's for a lot of years to come, for all sorts of reasons, then it flags up some interesting areas that we should be concerned about.
Thank you. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I'm really glad that the council went through the peer review process, because it demonstrates a confidence in knowing that you think you know what you're doing, but you just want it confirmed that that's the case. And the LGA itself, because it's a member organisation and you get member benefits, it doesn't turn up on your doorstep like Ofsted does, where you feel like there's going to be criticism for criticism's sake. Sometimes everything that the LGA does in terms of observing is meant to be done in a helpful manner, and that is how the language is couched here, because wherever you may have deficiencies in an organisation, there is always an opportunity to improve them, and by having your peers come along and discuss them with you, oftentimes they can demonstrate an example of where such a problem has been overcome somewhere else. So it's a process that involves possibilities and opportunities as well as challenge. And I look forward to seeing how the departments respond to the recommendations that are in here, because it will take a lot of hard work at a time when a lot of departments are already working very hard to deliver what they're used to doing. But I will just make one perception here, which is there's quite a lot of talk here about locality and how differently we can work. And it's interesting how the first thing that the administration has jumped on is the possibility for further co-location, whereas actually there's more detail in there about how actually services need to integrate a little bit more. There needs to be a little bit more responsibility delivered to our distinct communities to problem solve for themselves without the council deciding what's best for them. And that's another area that I look forward to being involved in developing going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Galt. Councillor Carter, please.
Just one point, Chair. Will scrutiny look at this? It would be nice to think that people not on this exec board have an opportunity perhaps to look at what we've been looking at in a more public forum, or a public forum like this, that's all.
Yes, we can certainly ask scrutiny to look at it. I think it's a be useful piece of work that really add value to what we do, to ask the scrutiny board to look at it. So with that suggestion, I'll turn to the recommendations on page 17, and I take it from the comments everybody is happy with those recommendations. So the next item under my papers is item 7, which is the revenue budget proposals for 23-24 and the provisional budget proposals for the 2 years after. At this stage, we're only moving to consultation, so I shall put that to the board. We move on to consultation. So those are the recommendations on page 54 and page 125. Do you want to come in, Councillor Carter?
Yeah, very quickly, just say I'm obviously reserving my position. We'll be having a no doubt robust debate at the council meeting when the final budget proposals come forward, and there's no point going over things twice. And at this stage, it's out for consultation, and we'll be going to scrutiny as a matter of course. So I shall reserve my comments until then, except for one, and that is in the light of what Councillor Galton just said about locality working. I'm really sorry to see the budgets of the community committees suggested yet again that they are reduced. And I know times are difficult, but we're not talking about huge amounts of money. But I welcome the fact that you have thrown in a suggestion that you will look at the YAF funding being incorporated with the wellbeing fund, so that the area committees can perhaps take a more sensible and comprehensive view of where money needs to go. And that's just in advance of consultation.
Councillor Galton, please.
I'd also like to reserve my position, and I will refrain from taking a deep dive on any particular issue.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll come back to for how many years we've protected community committee budgets when we do get to the debate. Councillor Carter was definitely not starting then. So I note Councillor Carter and Galton have reserved their position, and with that we will move on to item 8, please, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Leader. And item 8, which is the financial health monitoring, month 7, chapter 7 in the finances of the council this year. And as we know, since we set the budget back in February, circumstances have changed quite dramatically and been very challenging in terms of the costs that have linked to the council in terms of the pay award, inflationary pressures, energy prices, fuel prices, general cost of living, and so on. So this month we are predicting a £15.4 million overspend that's projected. However, I would just like to say that there are some plans in place to bring those savings back into line by the time we get to the end of the year, either with savings that are already outlined or by other measures. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Carter, please.
Yes, Chairman, I suppose you focus on the big area that takes up virtually all the overspend, which is children's services, and I fully realise it's a demand-led service in many respects, and we all know what the national situation is about all sorts of difficult cases with younger people since COVID going up quite a lot. I sometimes wonder how adversely some of the stories in the media affect young people, and sometimes I think we don't give young people the credit they deserve for taking notice of what they see and hear in the media, which sometimes is is guaranteed to make them worry when they shouldn't be worrying about anything apart from attending school the following day. So I make that point, but I'd like to know from Victoria. I personally don't, sounds not very optimistic to say the least, but I can't see this 15.4 million being reduced by much more than a couple of million. If that was the case, to balance the budget, presumably you'll use strategic reserves. If you have to use 12 million of strategic reserves, how much does that leave in strategic reserves, bearing in mind another difficult year is coming up? And then I want to come back on another subject, which is a specific on nursery provision at Little Owls, which I understand is accounting for 3 million of the overspend, and what action we're taking to put that situation right in advance of the next year's budget coming in, and also accepting the fact that there are, whilst the take up of places at Little Owls might have been very disappointing, it nonetheless there are young people benefiting from their services. And so what will we do to protect them if we have to take drastic action as regards the provision itself? I would like those questions answering.
Thank you. I'll ask Victoria and then Julie to come in, please. Victoria, please.
Thank you, Chair. On the current financial position, yes, I think it is going to be really challenging to bring that 15.4 million in. So the balance, whatever that is, when we get to outturn, like I say, probably be a couple of million less. We will need to use the strategic contingency reserve. We've currently got 29 million in that reserve, which we'll have at the end of the financial year. We've already committed to use 15 million against 23-24. to help balance that position. So the remaining amount will fund the overspending year. That means that there could, well, it'd be depending on the outturn, but could be between 2 and 3 million left in that reserve. We have been increasing at the level of general balances, and therefore, even though we've got a difficult year next year and we will need to deliver all those savings plans, the level of balances gives us some mitigation that we'll be able to manage if we're still forecasting an overspend position in children's going forward. However, what I would say is that there's been an awful lot of work with the directorate. We're meeting twice a week, myself and Julie, with the task and finish group, and there's a lot of action and a lot of work going on across all directorates to support that position, and to get a number of actions in place around the overspending area. So we are working hard to pull that pressure back in before we start the next financial year. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I bring Julie in, I think Councillor Curtis wants to come back on that point,
Look,
please.
let me make it clear. I'm not trying to have a go at children's services here, and I'm well aware that the task and finish group has been doing a lot of hard work. I mean, I do have a question about whether there should have been a task and finish group set up a number of years ago, but that's for another day, another debate. But the simple fact is that these are large sums of money, sobering thought, and you know, we'll hear from Julie in a moment, but you've a very, very tough road ahead, I think, here. And I think where there are issues you need to attend to, and it was actually flagged up in the nicest possible way in item 6, that you should attend to them.
Thank you. Julie, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, I think just on the general point, I think as Victoria's described, the twice weekly meetings are being very, very effective. I think just in terms of that cross-council, cross-directorate approach, we've already seen a number of sort of savings efficiencies that have come about, you know, not insignificant through that work. In relation to the little owls, that's absolutely right and correct that we do have an in-year pressure. As a consequence of that, what we have been doing is looking at action that we can take in the here and the now to address that. Some of that has resulted in us looking at where we have got settings, as an example, in close proximity to each other, and where there are not issues of sufficiency, that we're moving to amalgamate some of those settings. That means, in a sense, you know, the other issue that we have is recruitment and retention. So we do have some settings where there's under occupancy. We have some settings where actually there is the need in terms of demand, but we find it very difficult to recruit. So by taking an approach where we're looking at amalgamating settings and where we can be confident that there's no adverse impact in terms of sufficiency on the children and families, then that's what we're looking to do. We also have a number of settings which have run for a number of years, you know, year on year in deficit, and that's a position that we can't sustain. So where that is the case, and we've looked and we are looking at 4 or 5 of those settings in terms of reviewing them for potential closure, because again, it's not an area, it's not a position that we can sustain. Having said that, as part of that work, we have a real eye in terms of sufficiency, in terms of impact, that, you know, the local authority's duty for sufficiency, and to ensure that the children and families, and especially the children and families in the most deprived areas of the city, have got access to good quality childcare. So there's a number of things we're doing in the here and the now. In addition, what we have said is that we need to have a review of, I suppose, the local authority in terms of delivery of childcare, looking at, you know, what's our role in the delivery of childcare. As Councillor Carter says, you know, it is part of our early years, our early intervention and prevention strategy, but it's a whole system approach. We have a lot of, you know, really good quality childcare provided across the city by the private, by the voluntary sector, community sector. So what we do need to do, and what we have committed to do, as I've said, is to review the local authority's role in delivering daycare, but also thinking about our model, you know, what our business model is around that. So that will be a much more detailed piece of work.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, please.
Just to come back very, very quickly, and I appreciate what's been said, but there isn't much there. When will you be in a position then to tell us exactly what you are going to do on the ground?
Councillor Venner, please.
Yeah, if I could just reiterate, the amalgamation that Julie talked about, which is happening across 4 wards, is in year. We're looking at amalgamating 3 of those 3 ward settings in January and the 4th one in March. I've been in some of the meetings where we've briefed ward members who have been supportive, because all the amalgamations are centres that are in the same ward within a mile of each other. As Julie said, currently we've got staff spread across 2 sites because of the recruitment challenges, and we'll be able to potentially deliver a better service with all the staff in one setting, which also means we're hoping staff will move with the children, so minimising disruption. So that will deliver some savings in year, those amalgamations. And then, as Julie said, we're looking at a review about what our position is in the provision of the Little Owls services going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. Well, my concerns are around the same area, but we know that children's services has been the focus of my group's concerns for years in terms of how we tackle the overspending and try and change in many ways the internal markets in some of the areas where we've got challenges, where our very scale as an organisation and a provider and a carer means that actually we have some heft to make things move, and that has worked to a very great degree in adults, and it would be nice to see it replicated in children's, and it's just a regret that the focus is only being applied at this stage. In terms of the Little Owls nurseries, my group has also made their concerns clear about how we felt that children's centres in the city, whilst their retention being a really positive thing for the city, that we've made sure that all of them are kept open, it did feel that there was very little attention paid to them in terms of their sustainability of their business model. And being in the ward where your budget proposals are proposing a closure, not an amalgamation, it's a closure, and we're being told that as opposed to being brought in early on, it's concerning to us, because I've heard that there's been this intervention with children's centres and that people from procurement were talking to them, and I've asked for updates again and again, and I'm kept being told, well, nothing's been concluded, there's nothing to report back. And I really do think that when we're talking about universal services like this, then a spirit of transparency and inclusion for elected members in those areas would be really useful, not just for them to be able to report back to the families who are facing a shock right now in Rothwell, but also in terms of maybe you getting a better outcome in your discussion around business models for your operations. So I'm just very disappointed in that, because I think you could have a more long-term, more sustainable future by taking that into consideration. And I would like to see, Chair, to get to the full point, I would like to see some understanding of long-term planning in children's services in terms of these reviews that are happening in things like children's centres, that it's not just short-term considerations that are being taken in terms of why closures take place, because obviously circumstances change over time, and shortages in staff might be something that's happening this year, but might not be a problem in 2 years' time.
I think it's worth bearing in mind, Councillor Gorton, there are some very short-term challenges around inflation that we're having to deal with at the moment. Councillor Cooper, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. And just to respond to some of the points that have been raised, and I too would like to thank the officers that have been working on the task and finish group and have done some remarkable work in a short amount of time. And the savings that has generated will be felt within year and reduce those pressures. And hopefully they will continue until the end of the financial year. But the work that they've already started and will continue to do will have more of a broader impact in next year and the year after. We are hoping, and I do just to come back on Councillor Galton's point about being consulted. The proposals that you talked about, which are in the budget in the item previously, is an actual item for consultation. Council, so that's the start of the consultation around those proposals. I just think you need to bear that in mind when you make comments that decisions have been made, when decisions have not been made around that. They are out for consultation. And as you know from previous items that have been at this executive board many times this year, that when consultation is undertaken in this organisation, the feedback is listened to very carefully before any decisions are taken on that. And we heard, that you didn't want to make any comment when it was around the budget item that we discussed. But yet you did when it was the financial monitoring. So please remember, it's a consultation. Please feed into it. We'd like to hear what you've got to say before we make any decision around that. But we do and recognise the other point that Councillor Carter made about the strategic reserve. This organisation is in a position around setting its budget for next year and the next 3 years. The like that I've never seen while I've been a councillor in this place. £150 million worth of savings we need to make in the next 3 years. So for us to enable us to be able to do that, whilst also facing the other challenging circumstances within the country and the city, we're having to look at some, ideas coming forward and proposals coming forward that we wouldn't ordinarily be bringing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. I will turn to the recommendations then on page 226, and I take it everybody is happy with those. That's great. Move on to your paper, please, Councillor Venner.
So this is a proposal to extend places at Wykebeck Primary School from 3 to 11 to 2 to 11, which will create 24 two-year-old places in early years. This is an area of high deprivation. In fact, Gipton and Hare Hills is the ward of the highest deprivation that also has the most children. So there's very much an evidence of need for these additional places in that area. And this paper is the outcome of the consultation, which, as you'll see in the paper, is primarily supportive, with 2 minor objections, but both of which have been countered in the report, which outlines the benefits of early years provision. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Carter, please.
Yeah, one simple question going back to the previous debate, really. What impact, if any, does this have on the Little Owls provision at Swarcliffe, which is not a million miles away?
Julie, please.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any specific impact in terms of that Little Owls setting. What we are required to do really is to ensure that there is choice. I think, as Councillor Venner has said, the feedback that we have had through the consultation has been overwhelmingly positive about this. I think there's a recognition that the setting does very well at the moment, is a good performance setting, and that actually this will be a positive for children and families in the area.
Thanks, Julie. Councillor Carter, please.
I clearly didn't explain myself very well. That was not the purpose of the question. I don't doubt what you say is absolutely correct. What I was asking was, does it have any impact? And let's widen it and say on any nearby Little Owls facilities.
Councillor Venner, please, and then maybe Julie. Councillor
No, we
Venner.
don't believe so, due to the high demand in the area. As it's got the fastest growing birth rate in the city, Gipton and Hare Hills, and actually this request to expand came from direct requests being made to their setting about can they take 2-year-olds, because at the moment they're only taking from 3. Thank you.
Okay. Julie, please.
Yeah, I think it was just to come back on the point that Councillor Venn has just made, because it is an area which has got the highest number of families who meet the eligibility criteria for the free early education entitlement. And as such, we do not feel that it will have an impact on other settings. If anything, there's a need in this particular area and this particular school, which has been supported through the consultation.
Thank you. I take it, Councillor Gauntlet, do you want to come in? Okay. You're looking eager. So I will turn to the recommendations on page 269, and I take it the board is happy with those recommendations. That's great. We're on to Councillor Price papers, please, and item 10.
Thank you, Chair. So this report updates Executive Board on the outcome of the publication of a statutory notice related to resource provision at Iveson Primary School. An initial public consultation took place earlier in the year. This is for a proposal for a 16-place resource provision for children with complex communication difficulties and autism. We received 2 responses.
Thank you, Councillor Pryor. It looks like everybody on the board is happy with that proposal. So could we move on to and the recommendations on page 279? So could we move on to item 11, please?
Thank you. So this is the proposal to establish a Leeds Museums and Galleries Development Trust. The trust will be independent of the council, with the main purpose for fundraising for large capital projects and programmes. It wouldn't manage or own any council assets. If approved, the trust will be established by the end of the financial year. The proposals come forward as a result of a fundraising review of the service, looking at which funding streams it can access. We've looked at a model based on a trust, the Barnsley Museum and Heritage Trust, which was formed in 2015. They were able to move their fundraising, their income, from 15 grand a year to £500,000 a year. And they have 4 sites and we have 9. So we've potentially an even greater potential for fundraising from outside bodies.
Thank you. Councillor Carter, please.
Yep, I've had 2 briefings on this. The latest, I think, was yesterday. I'm generally in support of this. I'm in support of this. You, Councillor Pryor, made the point that the trust won't own any of our assets, which was one of the questions that I cleared up quite a while ago. The Barnsley, you're right to have highlighted the Barnsley situation, which has been successful, and again, right to highlight the fact that their base of operations is a deal smaller than ours. However, it has been successful. They also have a caveat in the agreement that says the council does not appoint trustees itself, but reserves the right to do so. I think that's a very sensible model. But I am concerned, as I am with all these things, and with the bitter experience, shall we say, of Welcome to Yorkshire in the past, about which nobody seems to want to comment anymore. But we all know what went on and what happened, that we get the right people on the board, and more particularly in terms of fundraising, it's a pretty specialist area, and you've highlighted a whole range of areas where fundraising can be undertaken, all of which I agree with, but the biggest one, of course, will be to get some really good corporate sponsors who will hand over considerable amounts of money. And to do that, you need a robust board, you need a very professional fundraiser, you need accountability from the parent organisation, i.e. us. Now, I'm reasonably reassured, and I'm certainly in agreement with this paper, but I want to be kept fully informed. I don't want to find this runs away as other organisations, one I've just mentioned, has done in the past, despite warnings from some people, me included. I want some assurance we're going to get that feedback here.
Who wants to come? Councillor Pryor, please.
Happy to offer that assurance. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. Well, it sounds like there's nothing really to object to.
I'm gonna give it a go anyway.
Because obviously we want to get as much value as possible for all of our historic venues and make sure that they get the maintenance that they can at a time when mainstream budgets aren't flush. On the other hand, I am concerned that, as I pointed out earlier, the council is a pretty big player, and the model that it's putting forward here is a very professional model where, for instance, judging by the cost of the fundraising contract, there will be somebody full-time looking at funding opportunities for the trust. And part of me is concerned because I know when we've, for instance, gone to things like Heritage Lottery Fund, and we've been told, well, there are 3 projects that we might want to get in Leeds, but Leeds is only going to get 1. So we're putting this one forward. And I'm just worried that if Leeds Museums Trust is moving into all these independent fundraising bodies, would it mean that other charities in the Leeds area might suffer as there's a displacement in the market, and the professional approach of our Museums Trust might mean that the more, what's the word, amateur organisations have less of a look in because there's only so much will come to this postcode area. Has any study been done on that and any consultation with our friends in the voluntary sector?
Certainly that's reflected in the papers. Councillor Pryor.
I think those would be questions for those bodies themselves. I don't think it would. I don't think these organisations put a quota on certain areas. The 2 organisations you've mentioned, the Arts Council England, National Lottery Heritage Fund. I understand we can't currently kind of bid to those, and we will under this. I don't think we should say, you know, we shouldn't do this because there's a risk of it being too professional. I think we need to crack on and look after our assets.
Thank you.
If it's not professional, it won't get any money anyway. So, you know, your argument's almost self-defeating, Stuart.
Thank you, Councillor Pryor. I don't see anybody else wants to come in, so I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 291. And I take it the board is happy with those recommendations. So we'll move on to item 12, please.
Thank you. So this is my 3rd and final paper. So this is to undertake a consultation on the introduction of a new container food and drink offer on part of the open market on Kirkgate Market. I'm sure, well, Kirkgate Market has, of course, come to the exec board many times. Different parts of the market have got different levels of successes. The food court inside, I think, is at currently 100% occupancy. The indoor market at over 90% occupancy. The outdoor market just over 40% occupancy. This is something that isn't unique to Leeds. Outdoor markets across the country are facing very similar circumstances. So this would use some of that outdoor space to ensure that we get additional income coming into the council without any loss of trader space that's currently being used.
Thank you, Councillor Pryor. Councillor Carter, please.
Yeah, I'm very supportive of this, with one caveat, which I'll come to in a minute. Somebody actually only a couple of weeks ago said to me about this and actually objecting to it, really, I suppose, and how wonderful the market was when he was a student and he used to go through the market and do all his shopping. And I reminded him that I was a bit older than him, but when I was a student, I did just the same thing. And times had changed. And we've had over a lot of years now, sadly, a decline in certainly outdoor markets, and this council under various administrations has done all sorts to try and boost the indoor market and the outdoor market. But I think that if the market traders embrace this and talk to the council about it, it shouldn't need to have any detrimental effect. And I know some of them are concerned. And I know that those concerns were raised at the board of the market. But given the right approach and the council being flexible and helpful, this should be a win-win. And it will provide an outdoor experience into the evening in a part of Leeds adjacent to the market, and should help the market, and it's certainly worth giving a try. The caveat is that we do support the traders in overcoming any fears they have. And for example, there are still 1 or 2 stalls in the outdoor market that purvey fruit, veg and stuff like that. Now, if these container businesses were to suddenly start not being food and drink offers, but also other offers that competed with those, then all we'll find is a displacement of one against the other, and that will achieve us nothing. So I do think we just need to watch out for that. But in general terms, I think it's the right thing to be trying to do.
You, Councillor Carter. Councillor Galton, please.
It's always a very difficult decision to make change at Leeds Kirkgate Market, because, as has been pointed out, everybody has an opinion about it, and generally most people have got a memory about it. And I think that's part of the problem, is that it's not a daily or weekly place where as many people should go as could go. And this is a difficult proposal, because the outdoor market is, by its very nature, less formal than the indoor market, and and people are attracted to it who can't afford the ongoing overheads of an indoor space. On the other hand, it has not delivered what it has meant to for several years now. And if this is something which can provide consistent funding to the markets as a whole, then it's something that I think should be very seriously considered. And as Councillor Carter said, that the traders themselves should be thinking of this very seriously as something which will bring extra footfall to the area potentially. The danger is, of course, that this kind of operation, which is delivered by specific commercial companies, has a certain demographic which is a little bit more moneyed than the full demographic that we hope to provide for in the market. And I think some people will fear that the poorer end of our city is once again being displaced a little bit by delivering this kind of facility. And I think it's up to the markets board to ensure that in the rest of the market, that plurality of offer is still delivered whilst this is ongoing.
Councillor Pryor, please.
I just want to be, and I agree with most of that, but nobody is being displaced. There will be more stalls left over than there are outdoor traders currently, and the outdoor market will still be one of the largest ones in the country. So it's win-win.
On that note, I'll turn to recommendations on page 359. I take it everybody's accepts those recommendations, agrees with them. So we'll move on to Councillor Hayden's paper and item 13, please.
Thank you very much, Leader. So my first paper is the further main modifications to the remitted Leeds site allocation plan. So the site allocation plan's remittal continues to be an examination by a planning inspector, and there is further technical stage of consultation that is required, and that's what this paper sets out. This is because the inspector has amended her initial findings. The inspector agrees with the council's proposals to delete 37 housing sites from the plan and keep them in the green belt. Initially, she reached the view that she was happy to have one of those sites at Barraby Lane come forward as an employment allocation. The inspector has now changed her mind following further consideration on Leeds employment land supply and the government's integrated rail plan. To that end, the inspector now needs the council to consult on changes to the status of Barraby Lane. The main modifications within this report seek to delete the site from the site allocation plan for employment. The consultation period will allow for comments to be made on that change. It is hoped that the inspector following this consultation plan, will now be in a position to issue her report to provide clarity to the council as it plans for future needs across the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Carter, please.
Yes, it's a curate's egg of a situation. Nobody that I can see amongst the elected members in this room actually was at the inquiry that was held in Leeds, apart from me. And it was perfectly obvious that the inspector was extremely vexated about the principle that the council's argument was that, yes, it agreed that 37 sites it had put in the site allocations plan should now come out, but one shouldn't. And in my view, and I said so at the time, the council failed to make the argument in principle. And the result is that it's now been backwards and forwards about one particular site. And my big concern is that this council might be seen as trying to get round a High Court judge's recommendation, followed by a planning inspector's recommendation, all that came about because a residents group, actually not in the part of Leeds in question, another part of Leeds, took the council all the way to the court and beat them. Because it seems to me that that sends a very, very dangerous message, particularly in advance of the council's position, rather, takes a very dangerous position, because it gives a message to the people of Leeds in advance of the revision of our site allocations plan that, Joe Bloggs, you can say what you want, you can argue all you want, you can win all you want, but you won't beat City Hall. Now, that is not a good message to give to the people of Leeds in advance of another local plan. And I had one of my numerous briefings not long ago about the next local plan, and it was impressed upon me by the planning department how the lessons had been learned because of what if I ever hear the expression lessons have been learned and we've moved on again, I think I shall scream, because lessons clearly haven't been learned. That now we were going to consult with everybody under the sun and actually listen to what they're saying and take on board their comments. We've heard that today as well. But certainly in the case of the current local plan, we didn't do that. And that was acknowledged by the planners as they process the next period. So the question is very simple. How on earth do we ensure that we aren't giving a message to the people of Leeds, the like of which I just spelt out, that, to be frank, we might consult and you might disagree and you might go to the High Court and you might go to the Planning Inspectorate, but City Hall will always win. Well, if you want public support, that ain't going to wash. And on this, I have to tell you that I think there was a 1,000 signature petition at wanting this land retained in the Green Belt. I've no doubt by the time this consultation concludes, it'll be more. And I just flag up those warnings. I find it uncomfortable. Indeed, I told Mr. Feeney, Mr. Elliott, Mr. Farrington throughout this that I had a feeling of great unease about the fix the council were going to get itself in. That's not a political point. It's a point of fact. And I think you need to be very careful.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Galton, please.
Mine's very different to Councillor Carter's. I'm concerned at the level to which the IRP is affecting our ability in the city to plan our future development. And I think it's spelled out very nicely in paragraph 10. Have we made any representations to the government about the development, repercussions of the delay in actually starting the HS2 approach to Leeds discussions, in particular what it is that it's going to have as its parameters for the different routes into the city?
Martin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, in the context of Councillor Galton's comments, it might be helpful just to look at the timeline of this process as it sits alongside the IRP. So we submitted our SAP remittal to the Secretary of State on the 26th of March 2021. And on the 17th of November 2021, the inspector supported that SAP remittal in terms of the main modifications, with 36 sites returning to the Green Belt and the one mixed use site, which was Barraby Lane, being allocated for employment purposes. On the 18th of November, the very next day, the integrated rail plan was published, which made proposed changes in terms of the cancellation of HS2 in its current form. And that's where then, if you consider in paragraph 14, where the inspector's latest position says that the IRP tips the balance of her initial judgment that she made on the 17th of November, which is now why she says she doesn't see that there is sufficient circumstances to support the allocation of employment use, and therefore putting it back into the Greenbelt. So it's on that timeline and the IRP that tips the balance in the inspector's conclusions. So in that context, and coming back to Councillor Galton's point, we've had many discussions with the Department for Transport and the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities on this, and that includes discussions at ministerial level in terms of the implications of the IRP and the concern we have also then about the delay, which is now over a year since the publication of the IRP, and the publishing of the terms of reference to be able to commence that study. Because as the paper points out, there's about 50 hectares of prime ready to develop employment land that is tied up in that safeguarding, hence the argument that we put forward that the inspector in a draft conclusions accepted on the 17th of November, but as a consequence of this, the IRP no longer does support the need for that additional employment land. So hopefully that helps, Leader.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Carter, please.
Councillor Galton has completely misconstrued the point I was trying to make. I probably deliberately. The planning issue is a matter of principle and public perception. The IRP is another matter, not entirely. That's why I started off by saying it's a curate's egg, because, and Mr. Farrington will, I think, agree, at the council's request, I attended a meeting with the then Minister for Transport to discuss the implications of the IRP and the speed with which we needed decisions on land holdings, which Councillor Galt was not a party to. And I have since had further correspondence and discussions on the same issue, because the delay creates a problem for the local authority. No question, I agree, but you can't separate that from or you can separate that, I should say, from a principled argument about the position the council appear to be in on Barrowby Lane, a site that's a long way away from the IRP implications in the middle of Leeds. Now, I appreciate entirely that one does impinge on the other, but you can't start to mix and match and give the general public the impression that you do what you want regardless. That is not a safe route to go down. I caution against it because, unlike you, Stuart, I spent weeks of my life in public inquiries on planning. I never saw you there on one occasion. And I know what goes wrong when a whole string of men in suits arranged against your planning officers, some elected members and the rest of it, and what planning inspectors' judgments can then be like. And I aren't necessarily defending any decision. I'm merely warning about the implications, and you should seriously take them on board, because it's a difficulty. It's a difficulty I don't want to see the council in, to be frank, because it will impinge on all of us.
Thank you, Councillor Carter. Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you. The High Court judgment did not tell this council to put them all back. I mean, David will help me with the actual the wording of it, but it told us to basically go back and look again. The housing element of Brown Moor was taken out of the SAP. Councillor Galton makes an extremely good point, because this land is safeguarded around HS2 or the proposed HS2, and it's still safeguarded, and we don't know when there is a lack of employment land in Leeds. We cannot use the employment land that is safeguarded in the city centre. So we need to provide good quality employment land with good connections for the people of Leeds to have good quality employment. And that was why it was proposed that the employment land remained in the SAP. As for the hearings, I think I've spoken at full council again, previous to this, that the hearing into the site remittal, I was not invited to. It was online because we were still on COVID restrictions. I would have gone. I did listen to it. That's what I would have done in person had we not had COVID restrictions. So I did exactly what I would have done if there weren't any restrictions. Because it was us making the council making the submission, I was not invited to speak. I did attend the remittal hearing, and I spoke in support of this employment land remaining in the SAP. As I said, it is very, very difficult when we're given to plan anything in the when the government takes the rug from under our feet in terms of just saying that something isn't going to happen, such a huge thing as HS2, and yet everything and yet giving us no steer. And we have contacted the government several times, and in fact I brought a paper to this exec board a year ago asking for questions that have not been answered. The study has not been started. It's now 13 months on, but you know, the government's had other things on its mind, I suppose, over the last year, such as forming one in the first place. So it's extremely frustrating. I'd like to thank Martin Elliott, David Feeney, and all the team on the work that has gone into there. We want a plan-led system so that we can strategically plan development in Leeds and not be at the whimsy of any developers or anybody else. And I know that how hard the team have worked on this site application plan and this remittal, and when actually and being frustrated at several terms. It's not about winning and losing. It's not about us versus others, council versus anybody else. We all want what's best for the city, and employment, good employment is very much needed in this city. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. I will turn to the recommendations on page 375 to start the public consultation. I take it everybody in the board is in favour of those recommendations. So we'll move on to item 14, please, Councillor Hayden.
Thank you. So this is the West Yorkshire Mass Transit Vision, and it's a 2040, which seems a long way away, but will be here very soon. And so this is the consultation, and I'm pleased to present it to the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Carter, please.
We've been there before, haven't we? Over and over again. And I have some concerns. Do I support the vision? Yes. Am I concerned about the delivery of a West Yorkshire Mass Transit system? Yes, I'm very concerned. Do I think that Wyker is going about it the right way? No, I don't. I think the local authority, a city the size of Leeds, is the place where we know the most about the obstacles that we've faced over a long time delivering a mass transit system. And I'll be frank with you, I don't think that Wyker, as it's currently constituted in terms of being the lead authority, the promoter of the scheme, is in a fit place at the moment to do that. And I really fear for this scheme yet again falling by the wayside. It isn't all about colourful brochures and photo opportunities, as senior officers around this table know, and so senior members know. It's a minefield. And I'll just quote something to you that apparently occurred at the council's one of the council scrutiny boards, and it was on about Wyker and its assurances processes. And the assurance process needs to be proportionate to the type of work being assessed, e.g. smaller and low-cost schemes, and where an existing strategic case already exists. Likewise, the need for strategic outline business cases has caused problems across West Yorkshire. And it just seems to me that over the past few months, we've seen the slow hand of government, which has been commented on by Councillor Hayden, being replaced with the dead hand of bureaucracy at Wyker. And I am really concerned that at Wyker, they aren't taking enough notice, and I want to see evidence that I'm wrong, please, of the experience that this authority and only this authority have on trying to put together a mass transit system, because only learning by experience and using the expertise of this city will we be able to deliver something across West Yorkshire. And I think Wyker at the moment is a million miles from that position. I'll be perfectly frank with you, and it disappoints me.
I think there's a number of players in delivering mass transit for this city, including the council, including Wyker, including the government. As Helen Hayden has said earlier, we're still waiting for the study we were promised in the integrated rail plan from the government around how mass transit fits into the wider transport vision. And my response to your comments would be is it doesn't seem the national government are sometimes fit to deliver schemes in this city. We've seen the delays on HS2, for example, and talks around the fact that a detailed route in very considerable detail for HS2 was published nearly a decade ago. It makes me feel old. I was sat in the room with Councillor Galton when it was published, when we first had the consultation, and there's been no progress on it. So I do think one of the underlying principles of our consultation response is actually about the pace and need to deliver this. And that is something that all parts of the system need to work on. We clearly are the Highways Authority, the significant landowner, and the planning authority in Leeds, and we as those roles have to play a big part in that as well. And again, I look forward to all parts of the system, Wyker as a transport authority, and the one that the government engages with on mass transit as well. Really sort of push on to the pace of delivery we've talked about in here, of seeing spades in the ground by the end of the 2020s. But you're absolutely right, Councillor Carter. All parts of the system have to play that role. We have a manifesto commitment from the current government to deliver mass transit for West Yorkshire. We're certainly ready to play our part, and this consultation response at this stage around the vision, I think, sets out as a city where we wish to go with mass transit. Well, sometimes with the national government, I'm not reassured, Councillor Carter, but you know, we've set out, I think one of the purposes of devolution was to set out our vision about where we wanted to go, and we shall certainly do that. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. Well, yes, it's nice to reminisce about Supertram, isn't it? One of the most sobering aspects of this paper is knowing that we're hoping to get mass transit by 2040 when I'll be 70. And I always imagine myself on this new transport system with, you know, some semblance of youth. But it's not going to happen, is it? With the timescales that we've got.
That'll be 91.
Wow. And I was just aware that there's a golden thread of frustration going through this paper, from what I can understand, because this is, of course, the council's formal response to Wicker, and it did feel like there is a real tension around progression and prioritisation of routes, and that we were all being a bit polite about it. If only we could scrutinise the mayor to ask those questions directly as a local authority, but I don't think she's been invited yet. But one of the things I was concerned about as well is when it was in paragraph 20, I'm trying to find it now, 26. It talks about how Wicker has an allocation of 200 million over 5 years for the development work and initial delivery of the scheme from the £830 million City Region Sustainable Transport Settlement. I'm just making sure that isn't the same 200 million that we're also supposed to be discussing our HS2 re-entry into the city. And so we're actually being intentionally held back by the government in terms of formulating what our mass transit system is going to look like as well. Because it's really hard consulting on something like mass transit as a bus user or a train user right now, and the situation you've got in front of you, without actually understanding exactly what it is that you're going to be offering your opinion on, when we don't even know what the mass transit system looks like as well. And that progression is something that I think the people of West Yorkshire would be really grateful for, in terms of feeling like they're a passenger on the journey of the delivery of mass transit that's actually able to participate. And at this moment in time, it just feels like it's a paper exercise that as soon as you say, yes, I'd rather have this, or no, I wouldn't rather have that, it doesn't go anywhere anyway, because it hits that bureaucracy that Councillor Carter is talking about, or it hits the lack of creativity in Westminster.
I think I'm really interested. So we've already had Councillor Galton suggest that we're being too professional earlier in the meeting as a criticism, and the fact that I think in his last contribution he wanted people to be asked but didn't want a consultation period. I know Lib Dems enjoy sitting on the fence, but that is stretching the credibility. I do think it is really important in this. You know, we could spend a delightful afternoon going through the history of schemes I certainly wouldn't, Councillor Carter. We could spend a delightful afternoon going through the history of it all. I think quite clearly we have a government with a manifesto commitment to deliver. As the paper sets out, they have supplied not money to deliver a scheme, which would be significantly higher, but they have are intending to supply some money to develop a scheme further, and that's the process we have to go through at this point, and that's where we're going. Again, to ask people involves a consultation period, so that's clearly what Wicker are going through at the moment. We've quite clearly set out from our perspective as a city where we wish to see this go, and particularly around the timescales, to have something delivered in as quick as possible. I mean, I know 10 years sounds like a long time to get even the first bit of route up and running, but in the timescales of delivering big transport projects, in the system we have in this country, it is a very swift timetable. Does anybody else want to come in on this item? Councillor Hayden, please.
I think we need to, Leeds definitely needs transport infrastructure, especially if we're going to hit our, our very ambitious, quite rightly ambitious targets for carbon reduction. And the transport is over a third, if not 40% of our carbon emissions. So we need to do it at pace. We also need to something that joins up West Yorkshire and is a benefit in terms of economic growth and inclusive growth and this. So I will be a lot younger than, but actually not a lot, but it does. The timeline does seem, but it'll all be finished by 2040. It will start and be delivered in some part before that. But we've got to keep that in mind as well, and just hope that my children are still young enough to use it when it does come about. So but we definitely need to be ambitious about the transport needs of this city and the rest of West Yorkshire. As a bus and train user, yes, we do need to do as much as we can about the buses and the trains at the moment, but we definitely need to look at a fully integrated and what we can do to bring that about. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Martin, please.
Yeah, it was just to add some comments, Leader, to respond to the comments made that I mean, as the paper sets out, the promoter for the scheme is the combined authority, and that's not ourselves. As the promoters of the scheme, the combined authority will have to go through an evidence-led process to establish what the scheme is in terms of its form and how it's delivered. Because we're not the promoter, we're not as restricted in that way. So what we're trying to do in the letter is give our clear view that then helps the combined authority in how they then formulate their position. So in terms of the comment that Councillor Carter made about deliverability, we are clear in our own mind about what comes forward as a scheme is buildable and deliverable and addresses those points. And in terms of the experience that we have as a local authority on delivering schemes, Gary and his team have had considerable dialogue with the combined authority in terms of the resources and making sure that both the districts and the combined authority are properly resourced to be able to make sure that we can deliver. And that's the process that we're going through in supporting the combined authority in Leeds.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 412, and I take it everybody is happy with those recommendations, and certainly I've noticed the comments about pace and moving on with the project. So thank you for that. We've agreed that paper, and as we sat in the middle of December, I think it's the right time to talk about solar farms. Councillor Hayden, please.
It's sunny today, isn't it? So yeah, perfect to talk about solar panels. I'm really proud to bring this paper forward, and huge thanks to Polly Cook and her team for all the work on this. I mean, it has to. I want to start by saying that our commitment to clean renewable energy has been going on for some time now, and last exec board I brought forward the district heating a paper about the annual report, and this just continues our ambition that we want to continue and do as much as we can that our energy comes from clean renewable sources, and ensuring or helping to ensure the energy security of the city at a time when energy security is precarious nationally and internationally, and it's kind of like I'm really proud that we are doing everything we can, and we would be in a very good position if it wasn't for the increases in energy prices that have overtaken what we've actually saved. But we are saving a lot of carbon, and that's incredibly important. So this paper sets out ambitions to create solar farms for the city, which will, if it's a site, it will also provide opportunity for biodiversity net gains, because you can plant many different things, and then of course the animals all will benefit from that, which will help to enhance the local environment. But it's not just sites that we're considering. There's also the option for rooftop farms to further increase energy production and using that space effectively. The report outlines the process behind selecting and developing a site, along with the challenges and risks in doing so, and seeks a range of approvals necessary to progress towards meeting a new increased target for local renewable electricity. This target would increase from 10% of the council electricity demand through locally based renewable generation by 25-26 to a new commitment to achieve 30%, and that will be much welcomed if we can. I'm sure we will achieve that 30%. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Polly, would you like to come in, please?
Can I just say something about a point of governance? So unfortunately, due to an admin error, the forward plan deadline for this was missed. So it's been on the list for 26 rather than 28 days. The chair of the relevant scrutiny committee has been notified and understands that we're relying on the general exception procedure rule. It's impractical to wait, as we need to get in principle decision to develop the solar farms in order to be able to start a procurement as soon as we're ready, given the time pressures of the energy crisis at the minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Polly. Councillor Galton, please.
Thanks, Chair. I'm very supportive. And I know that some politicians get a little bit jittery around the delivery of renewable energy and land usage. But actually, my experience is that through things like neighbourhood fora and their neighbourhood plans for their area, a lot of people would actually welcome such kind of investment in their neighbourhoods, especially if they might actually get prior access to it. So I look forward to this. And one of the things that I think is important is we're also looking at our food security, aren't we? And so there's the argument that we shouldn't be putting productive land for energy usage. But I think there are plenty of examples of land being used concurrently for energy generation and arable production, as well as for pasture. So I don't think it's an either or equation, and I wish you Godspeed.
Thank you, Councillor Galton.
Yeah,
Councillor Carter,
I
please.
don't get particularly jittery, providing that the provisos that Stuart's just mentioned are adhered to. And that is that ward members are consulted and that communities are consulted and we get buy-in. And I think we will get buy-in in all sorts of perhaps unexpected areas. What we won't get is buy-in if we bulldoze ahead regardless. And so the warning is no bulldozing ahead regardless. Make sure we talk, make sure ward members know. And the only thing and I also agree that I think there can be concurrent uses. They don't have to be, it doesn't have to be we're doing that, so you can't do that. But it was quite clear when some of my members saw this paper that sites were mentioned and no one had said a dicky bird to them. And they weren't necessarily opposing. We said, well, you know, here the council goes again. It's the wrong way to do it. You must make sure you engage ward members because they will help get the community on side. If you don't, they won't be able to, and you will find opposition when you don't need to.
Helen, please. Councillor Hayden, please.
Thank you, Chair. No sites have been identified as yet, and I can absolutely assure you that full consultation, I don't know how to drive a bulldozer, but full consultation will be done. And as we don't have to knock anything down to do this, I won't need my bulldozer, but yeah, full consultation. I can absolutely assure you of that, with ward members, with community groups, with neighbourhood forums, with community committees, wherever anybody will listen to us. Once we've, it's a very tricky job identifying sites. And so as soon as we do so, we will be talking to everybody involved, because as people know, I really quite enjoy talking. So.
Polly, please.
The sites that Councillor Carter is referring to, the reason they were mentioned was just to give an example of some of the challenges, because they aren't feasible, but we've got a list of about 1,000 different sites. And so we're working through them. And at the point that the sort of planning and the DNO connection side is worked down, we obviously will consult at that point. And we had started some early member consultation on the one that we thought would be feasible, but that got ruled out really quickly.
Thank you. Councillor Galton, please.
Well, just as an addition, Chair, we were talking about how old we were the other day. I can remember when we were marketing the city as a tourist destination, and we pointed out how Leeds has more sunshine hours than Paris. So I think that's something to take into consideration when we think about our potential as a solar energy provider.
That was the former council leader, John.
Thank you for that history lesson. We are, I think I'm going to have to, as we've concluded this last item, I'm going to turn to the recommendations on page 461, and I take it everybody is happy with those recommendations. That's great, thank you. And as we I'll close the meeting as we get close to the festive period, just to wish everybody a happy Christmas and a restive break. Thank you.